we know, and we can tell children today that the one guarantee we're going to provide to them is they're going to face obstacles, they're going to fail at things. Being in scouting provided for me and provides today a safe environment for kids to be able to do that. How to overcome adversity, how to pivot and adapt when things may not go perfectly. We're teaching young men and women that are in high school age today will unlock to them to be much more successful at school, in college, or a trade school, or certainly to give back to their community, to be active in their church, to be leaders in their company. All gets grounded by becoming that Eagle Scout.
I am joined now by Andy Zahn, the CEO of Scouting America, Dan Beard Council. Andy, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jack, for the invitation. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. You guys are in a little bit of a busy time right now with the Scouting Blitz is underway. You guys do this every year right when school's getting back in session.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So school's back in session. Cannot believe how fast the summer went by, but here we are. And there's always a good time for a family to join scouting. However, the fall, when school gets back in session, some busy parents and families are trying to figure out their calendar for the year. Right. Is really an opportune time. So we are intentionally, actually, we'll be presenting scouting opportunities to over 150,000 area school students throughout the fall, and providing an invitation for their family to join the adventures of scouting. Yeah,
trying to get in there and make sure calendars get figured out, because like you said, it's school. People need time, activities to do after school. And I'm just thinking now in terms of a busy season for you guys. I mean, if this is the Scouting Blitz right now, it's not like the spring and summer is a lay back and do nothing time for your organization.
No, the summer we run 24/7. Yeah. Pretty much June, July, early August with our summer camp season. So I guess in comparison, we'll slow down a little bit in the fall, but I don't think there's any such thing as a downtime anymore.
Yeah, right. And in terms of the programming that you guys have, I was looking up stuff. It's boys and girls from like little kids to young adults. It's not like things cut off when you're a teenager or anything like that. It's a wide variety of programming.
Yeah, it is. We've had, so corporately, we are still the Boy Scouts of America. And a couple of years ago, we introduced a new DBA, Scouting America. And I think as part of that rollout, it was easy for us to forget that we've had young women in our programs for over 50 years. The most recent changes, though, is an opportunity now for girls in elementary school to join the Cub Scout program, the iconic blue shirts and racing Pinewood Derby cars, and then for young women to join the scouting program to begin their trail to become an Eagle Scout.
Yeah, and so the website for anybody interested, we'll mention it a couple of times, beascout.org is the website to check everything out. As far as the programming specifically in the fall, are there some upcoming things that people could look forward to that are coming up soon, event-wise?
Well, we have, it's funny, Jack, you mentioned that. It seems like every weekend there's something going on. And every time I have an opportunity, even tonight, there will be scouting activities happening throughout Greater Cincinnati in American Legion post halls and school cafeterias. And that's the beauty about scouting, is that it is so incredibly local. Yeah. That it doesn't even necessarily happen at the Dan Beard Council level. It's happening at the Catholic parish, or it's happening with the school PTA. In one given neighborhood where families are gathering together to do scouting.
Yeah, I want to ask you this about maybe to address perception, and I may be off base on this, but after reading everything that I read about what you guys do programming-wise and the various activities, you saw some of the footage there from the Dever Center, the idea of tying knots and rubbing sticks together, you guys are doing way more than that, and it's way more than just like cutesy arts and craft type stuff. I think there's some real along with the fun, and I always enjoyed camping when I was a kid, but there's some real practical learning opportunities that are going on.
Jack, when I look at my role, right, I have such an honor of being the steward of scouting in Greater Cincinnati. Like countless others in the past have. And it's been a luxury, and it's been a challenge, right, of being a part of an organization that is well over 100 years old. Right. And I think a lot of the community still thinks of scouting as, the 1950s Norman Rockwell Saturday evening post-esque, helping little old ladies across the street, tying knots, going camping. Now, we do all that yet today.
Yeah.
But to your point, we have really embraced a lot of change into making sure that our programs are relevant for what kids today want, what their parents are looking for, and to prepare them in a much more intentional way to be effective in a very ever-changing workforce.
Yeah, I mean, you're involved at the local level like this, running the Dan Beard Council. Do you see some specific cases of kids that go and check out some sort of skilled trades presentation or an activity that then leads them into a career and stuff?
We do. So you mentioned in your tee up to this, this past January, we opened a new almost 10,000 square foot facility, the Dever Family Skilled Trades Education Center. That's at Camp Freelander. We're actually inside the 275 Beltway in Miami Township. And that is it's created an opportunity for now us to do year-round programs that we've been doing for decades. We've had plumbing, merit badges in plumbing and auto mechanics and such. Now we have a state-of-the-art facility. We have business partners in the greater Cincinnati region that are giving young people, whether they're scouts or not, an opportunity to work with their hands and find that there are alternative pathways to success. And in the skilled trades, really high-paying, in-demand jobs that are not going to be threatened by AI, and that, candidly, our ecosystem in greater Cincinnati is thirsting for. If you look at the 80,000 job deficit our region's facing over the next decade, this is scouting's role and way to help be a part of that solution.
Yeah, and I also want to get into, I think there's an idea of, the civic engagement portion, which is one of the pillars of what you guys do, teaching more ethical choices and being polite and being a stand-up person. And a lot of that sounds, like you said, Norman Rockwell-y and like aw shucks kind of stuff. But like for everybody that wants to complain about kids today and being frustrated with society and maybe a lack of politeness, all that stuff gets covered by what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so the Scout Oath and the Scout Law, and you had mentioned in a break that you were a Scout growing up.
Yeah.
And for your listeners that were a Scout and maybe you only had a couple years, my guess is your listeners remember their Cub Scout den leader. They probably still have their Pinewood Derby cars in a box that their parents finally gave them to move out of their house. But in all of those years, Scouting has taught these, we call them timeless values.
Yeah.
Being polite, treating others with a mutual respect. I'm biased, obviously, from what I do, but I think everyone can agree that in a divisive society that we live in today, we'd probably be much, much better if we had more scouts that were grounded in the Scout Oath and the Scout Law. Yeah,
from a societal perspective, I think that's something that's actively working against a lot of frustrations that we have right now. And then along with the job skills and some of the practical stuff that these kids are able to learn. The Dever Center that you mentioned just opened in January. Tell me about the process of making that happen. That's a big leap from you've got the different camps and all the different programs, but now having this physical space, that's a lot of work to build up to that.
Yeah, so it was the creation of the center, which is a first of the kind in Scouting America on a national level, especially with the size and the scope of what we've been able to develop locally. It came from, during the pandemic, we weren't able to really do a lot. Like every other organization, even though Scouting is in the outdoors.
I was going to say, did that help a little bit?
It helped a little bit.
Yeah.
But, in our Cub Scout program, right, trying to wrangle a Cub Scout den over Google Classrooms, we tried, but it did not go well. But we took those that year and a half as an opportunity to look back and say, what do we want Scouting to be in greater Cincinnati going forward? Mm-hmm. We're not turning our back on what is critical to our identity. That's outdoor adventure and leadership and giving back to the community. But for the past 15 years, some of our most popular merit badges at summer camp, and I always had to put the preface, take swimming, take shotgun out of that list. They're always our most popular.
Okay.
But it was plumbing, it was home repair, it was painting. So we got thinking, is like, look, there's an opportunity here for us to do what we've already been doing in just in a much more intentional way. And then creating inroads with corporate America in greater Cincinnati that had those same goals And that is what led to an announcement a couple years ago that launched a fundraising campaign that lasted about a year, and that led to we cut the ribbon, if you will, this past January. And we had our first 100 or so young people go through and perhaps use a welding torch for the first time.
And you said there's an opportunity there. That's not just a Scout exclusive facility.
It's not. When we developed this, and it was something I told my team and our board all the time, if we have this state-of-the-art, beautiful facility and it's only being used on a couple weekends a year by the Scouts and during summer camp, we failed. This is an opportunity for us to provide an asset to the region, to schools that 25 years ago eliminated shop class. Mm-hmm. This is an opportunity now to lean back into something that I think we got away from over a number of years. In your introduction, you showed us some great photos, and I appreciate that with the partnership we have with Clark Montessori.
Yeah.
And that photo was a group of about 60 high school students that came out, and very, very few of them were Scouts. But they walked away with their eyes opened that, look, there's a lot of opportunity to be wildly successful in the workforce doing something that maybe they never had thought of before, never had an opportunity to explore.
Yeah, and jobs that are in demand, stuff that is less threatened by, a thinking computer taking over for it. That's really valuable education that these kids can have. Talking about the Devers Center, and you talked about the fundraising for it, that effort. We have a lot of nonprofits on this show, and one of the perennial topics on that is the ongoing challenge of fundraising. And there's multiple different venues. Cincinnati is such a unique city in that we've got so many big companies here. There's such a good local focus on the community that there can be a lot of support from that. But from your perspective, talk about your organization's fundraising work and sort of the ongoing challenges of that.
I'd be remiss not to echo what you said. We are so incredibly blessed to be in Cincinnati with a very philanthropic, generous city. Full of business leaders, titans of the corporate America. But for us, it is a challenge. We've been successful through a lot of hard work. We've been growing our budget when, unfortunately, a lot of other non-for-profits have had to face much more stark challenges of laying staff off for selling off assets and such or eliminating programs. We're in an upswing now is that we rely so heavily on private philanthropy, specifically through individuals, that we've been able to provide a case to the community of why scouting is so important today. And of course, I'd be remiss, right? If you're looking for a great opportunity to support a great not-for-profit, think of Dam Beer Council and consult your tax advisor. I know there's a lot of opportunities and benefits to do that, but honestly, what we're extremely proud of is over 85% of every dollar that's given is directly going back into program delivery. We've been able to minimize and shrink our overhead while we actually have grown our program in the region.
When you talk about those individual donors, how many, what percentage of that is folks that had a seed planted when they were a little kid and were involved in the scouting program back then?
A lot are. Not all of them necessarily were in scouting. Maybe their siblings were in scouting or their father was a scout. Many of them were a scout, at least for a couple of years. But a lot of them just understand what the challenges that youth today are under. I feel that challenges that were only amplified, unfortunately, during the pandemic.
Sure.
And youth today facing growing isolation and staring at computer screens and not having authentic interpersonal relationships. Scouting is the perfect answer to combat that.
Yeah.
We're social without the media. We use the great outdoors as our classroom and is hands-on, everything from teaching leadership to giving back to the community. It's not something where you come and listen to lectures. Meeting one, badge one, you're actually out in the community doing something.
Yeah, that's really exciting, and you get to sort of see that. You've seen it as you come along. I know you guys recently gave a shout out to Kate Clyde, who's your annual fund manager, and again, talking about the constant need to try to figure out where funding is coming from. I like the idea that people who have a history with the organization are willing to come back and help fuel it to what it's trying to be now.
Yeah, thank you for the call to Kate.
Yeah.
Kate's one of about 30 full-time staff that we have. And so we have 30 full-time staff. We're serving 11,000 youth, and we do that through 3,500 registered adult volunteers. So staff like Kate they're only successful by multiplying themselves through volunteers. So it takes all three. It takes the family to participate, it takes the volunteers to make it, and then the staff to be able to steward the organization.
Absolutely. And speaking of stewarding, we do need to take a break. We're going to steward our way into the next block of the show. But, we're going to talk more with Andy about your specific path and being, a professional scout for all intents and purposes, the challenges of volunteer organization, and a lot more. Andy's on. Thank you very much for coming on. I want to talk to you about you being a professional scout. First off, you are an Eagle Scout.
I am.
And I want to get into a little bit of what kind of achievement that is, because that's a lot of work. We talked in the Big Bite segment about the relatively small number of scouts that actually get to that level. What was that like for you in your sort of journey in this organization?
So growing up, I grew up in Iowa. So I'm a transplant to the Queen City. Growing up in scouting, I don't remember how I joined. My guess is a staff member in Iowa recruited me during the school day, just like we're about ready to do in Cincinnati, and probably signed up because my parents signed me up,
Sure.
right? When I joined scouting and worked towards becoming an Eagle Scout, I had no idea necessarily what the credibility that was going to provide. Mm-hmm. And every year when we celebrate our local class of now young men and now young women in Greater Cincinnati that achieved their Eagle rank, it's part of my message is you'll never ever regret this. And even sitting here today, you probably don't fully appreciate what this will mean for you. And it's about the leadership skills that are required. It takes years of progressive advancement ranks to become an Eagle Scout. The project itself is leading it's a large scale, couple hundred hours of community service
Right.
to a community benefactor. Those are probably not the things that I thought of. I probably thought of it because I had friends that became an Eagle Scout, or I had maybe subtle or unsubtle nudges from my parents to become an Eagle Scout. But today it is right around 4% of scouts in Greater Cincinnati will ever achieve their Eagle Scout rank.
What has that meant for you, achieving that and sort of knowing what that accomplishment unlocked for you professionally?
For me, it was, the setting out a goal for yourself, being able to quickly dust yourself off and pick yourself up when you fall. We know and we can tell children today that the one guarantee we're going to provide to them is they're going to face obstacles, they're going to fail at things. Being in scouting provided for me and it provides today a safe environment for kids to be able to do that. How to overcome adversity, how to pivot and adapt when things may not go perfectly. Maybe the weather is bad on a camp out that you're planning,
Right.
or you need to raise money for your Eagle Scout project. These things that we're teaching young men and women that are in high school age today will unlock to them to be much more successful in school, in college, or a trade school, or certainly to give back to their community, to be active in their church, to be leaders in their company. All gets grounded by becoming that Eagle Scout.
Yeah, you've been involved in scouting for like 20 plus years. In terms of being a professional in this field, did the Eagle Scout come first, or did you want to be in the scouting organization professionally? Was this always the plan?
No, it was not. I went to the University of Northern Iowa. And I was
You and I.
That's right. And I went on a full ride music scholarship.
Oh, no kidding.
Playing the tuba. And it took me my freshman year to realize that it was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
Well, the tuba industry is famously cutthroat.
Yes, it certainly is. Now, since I grew up in scouting and worked on my summer camp staff and my home council in Iowa, I knew that there were people that got paid to work for the Boy Scouts of America at the time. So I was probably an anomaly of staff that said, look, when I graduate with my undergrad, we require our professionals to have a college degree. I'll give scouting a try. And I figured it would be a job to do for a year or two. That was 24 years ago. And here I am and have moved my family 3 or 4 times to different parts of the country, advancing scouting.
What was the attraction for Cincinnati? Because I believe, were you in St. Louis before? And then was it the idea that the leadership position in Cincinnati opened up? What was the attraction to come here?
Yeah, so actually it goes back a little bit longer, farther back, Jack. I grew up in Iowa. I started working in my home council in the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City area. And I remember going home and telling my wife, Kim, that there was a job opportunity in Cincinnati, and this was back in 2006, 2007. We knew Cincinnati was in the state of Ohio.
That's a good start.
That was about all we knew.
Okay.
So when we moved here the first time, I was on the staff in Danbury Council in 2007. You might as well have put 2 Iowa kids in Midtown Manhattan. We were way out of the water, if you will, from our comfort zone. We ended up falling in love with the region, and we have one daughter. She was born here, but she was only about 5 months old when an opportunity came to move to St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
So I moved to St. Louis, moved my family to St. Louis. I was the chief operating officer for that local chapter. So you fast forward to 2019, my predecessor had announced his retirement, and the 2 kids from Iowa that couldn't put Cincinnati on a map needed zero convincing to jump at the opportunity to move our family back to Cincinnati.
That's great.
And we came out, and I interviewed in December of 2019, was afforded the invitation by our board to become their next CEO. Started in my role back in Cincinnati, February 1st of 2020.
And of course, like we mentioned in the last segment, February of 2020 was an interesting time to be taking the reins and getting into the driver's seat of any organization or business.
Impeccable timing.
Yeah, did you start to question the decision once things like the pandemic hit and you're all of a sudden, you've moved to a different city, even though if it is a familiar one, and you've taken the driver's seat of this new organization where at a time when nobody really knew what the future of anything was for like a year and a half?
I can say this and admit this to you now, Jack, because we have gotten through it. There were many, I'm going to say dark days of managing an organization that was affected, like all of our lives were affected with the pandemic, making a move and uprooting my family to come move again,
right.
To follow my career. There were a lot of days of never regret, but days of, did I make a mistake?
And trying to run a nonprofit specifically, because certainly the way that money was being spent during that year, it was a lot different than the way money had been spent like over all of the years leading up to it.
Yeah, at Danbury Council, we went through. Hopefully it wasn't me that brought this bad luck, but yeah, we went through 3 individual challenges in 2020 to 2022 that each one would, on its own, be catastrophic to a non-for-profit, the pandemic being one. Our national organization about the same time was going through a restructuring bankruptcy, which we were never, luckily, never named in the bankruptcy, nor were we in bankruptcy locally. But you think back to...
But that's something that you still have to deal with as like the local representative.
You can't turn the news on.
Right.
You can't open the paper without seeing scouting. And then we had a challenge of funding. We were one of many, many great non-for-profits in Greater Cincinnati that were no longer being funded by the United Way. And that's not a slight at United Way, because the United Way was going through a lot of challenges in their workplace campaigns. But those three things happening, pretty much one domino after another, it was an opportunity for me to exercise what I just said about being an Eagle Scout, growing up in scouting, on how do you face adversity? You face it head on. Are you going to fall? Of course, we fell, but we fell forward and we came out of it in a much, much stronger position as a result of that resilience, the grit. One of our main benefactors, Dan Baker, always said, you have to have the grit. Scouting grit to get through that.
Is that message specifically something that gets incorporated into curriculum and activities for these kids?
It does, whether it's necessarily the word grit or not, but it is that, look, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And it's not about luck, it's about putting our heads down and believing in the mission, even when others may be questioning it, or whether we're all at home to flatten a curve, or whatever the challenges were that we face as a community together 5 years ago. You keep the end in mind, and you come out, at least we've come out, in such a stronger position.
Andy Zahn is the CEO of Scouting America, the Dan Beard Council here locally, doing their big scouting blitz right now. If you've got some kids, you're looking to plan out your calendar for the fall, beascout.org is the website. Andy, thanks for coming on and sharing everything.
Hey, Jack, thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.